For week 2 of our watercolor landscapes class, we're really concentrating on brushwork because that's one of the things that you have to practice over and over and over to get comfortable with it. Anything you do with your brush qualifies as brushwork. So even mixing up this green, so I've got a whole bunch of it ready to go, is me using my brush and practicing different ways of applying that brush. I'm gonna rinse off here. I've got a whole bunch of my dark green. I'm gonna add a couple of drops of water just to make sure it goes further. And then I'm gonna go for my dark red, which is a complement to the dark green. It's kind of on the opposite side of the color wheel. And you'll notice with these particular colors, the crimson and this viridian hue that we've got in our palettes for this class, it goes just a little like sea green. Sometimes they'll go very purple with a dark red and a dark green, a little more water there. And then I'm gonna clean off my brush just by tapping it on my towel over here. So I've got my paint on it, full strength, and then one little dot, and that tells me that I can do that again. And I'm gonna practice really thin lines here. I'm only gonna put 2 or 3 on the paper so that this video doesn't take too long, but you can go ahead and fill up an entire page with this. And then I'm gonna try it with full strength. It's a little bit darker. You'll notice I'm resting my hand on the paper. That's gonna make my lines steadier. If you want perfectly straight lines, you're gonna need to go with masking tape or with a straight edge of some sort. Next thing we're doing is we're just seeing what the tip of this brush will do when it zigzags back and forth. So we're just practicing different kinds of lines. And then what if I push down when I'm going sideways? I make that brush wider by pushing the bristles into the paper. And as I go, you can see that I'm running out of pigment and I'm running out of water. I'm gonna start to get some spots where it doesn't actually paint the page. That's a dry brush technique. That's something that I wanna be able to do on demand. So let me turn the camera a little bit so you can see what happened there. So it faded out. So go ahead and play a whole bunch with these kinds of lines. Can you do that without pressing it down to the paper and just have a line that goes back and forth until you run out of paint? And then pushing it down and making it wider. So fill up pages and pages with lines, just practicing the different kinds of things that you can do with that brush. I'm gonna move down here a little bit and we're gonna do a leaf by starting out with a very thin line, pressing it down for a thick line, and then picking it up without moving it. So this is a very basic sort of leaf shape, but so many plants have these. And then see where the color sits and how it changes from one end of the leaf to the other. And I'm just gonna keep painting until I run out of paint on my brush. Do this several times, maybe try it with different colors and different color mixes. And my goal is to get to the point where I'm doing a dry brush technique, so it's not covering the whole paper. Let's see if we can do that. So the tip of the brush, the flat part of the brush, and then lift. Tip, flat, lift, tip, flat, lift. Now here's my dry brush starting. You'll notice that it got a lot lighter as I was doing that. I'm gonna try it one more time with even more paint on my brush. So I'm gonna mix up a really dark color using both my red and my green, but not adding any more water to it. So I've got this extra dark puddle over here in the corner of my palette. And then I'm gonna come back about right here, tap it on the towel just to take some of that water out, and I'm gonna make leaves until I run out of paint on my brush again, and see how that's a little different. So tip of it down, and I'm pulling the brush towards me just a touch. And you'll notice at the very round end of this leaf, I'm starting to get a little bit of that white paper showing through. If I don't want that, I'm gonna roll the brush a little bit as I pick it up. Keep that round, and now I'm really into the dry brush, so there's not much liquid back on that brush. but there's still some of that dark pigment because I mixed it up so dark for that. The next step in this process is to try that with a little curve to your leaf. So starting with the tip of your brush, pushing it over to the side, and then coming back up with a curve. So for me, being right-handed, this is a pretty easy way to do this. I'm gonna try it the other directions, going towards my hands and away from it. So go ahead and play with what happens going different directions. And then do you need to roll your brush as you pick it up in order to keep that smooth? Or can you just lift it straight off the paper? And you can see the difference there. I'll do a roll here. So I'm gonna turn the brush with my fingers as I'm picking it up. That's one way to pick it up. Or I can come here and lift it straight off the paper, and you can see just a little bit of difference in how this end of the leaf works. So turning this into a more complex leaf, I'm going to do a leaf here, but instead of picking it all the way up, I'm going to do a stem on that leaf. And then I'm going to do parallel leaves so that they meet at the center on that same stem. And if you go outside and look at leaves, you're going to find a whole bunch of different trees and bushes that have leaves with these parallel position on the stems. The other way, and you use this in identifying plants, so it's a really interesting thing to learn about once you start painting, learning more about the types of plants that you're painting can be really interesting. So I'm going to start with that one leaf and the stem. I'm going to give myself a nice big long stem here, but this one's going to be alternating. So this one's going to come in here. The next one's going to come a little further down the stem. So this one is like your elm trees, I believe, have alternating leaves. And the more you practice, the more you can be consistent, or you can deliberately make changes, both in the color by allowing that paint to get lighter, and in the shape of the leaves by doing things like curving them in different directions. So go ahead and practice a whole bunch of very simple lines and leaves. Fill up several pieces of paper if you have the time. Go ahead and do both sides. And you don't really have to tape this down because the paper isn't getting wet enough to buckle. So it can go a little bit quicker with these exercises. Give that a try. Let me know how it goes.